I know if I was an executive up at the top, I would be looking for these stories, and I can see the value in these stories, how they can make us money, because at the end of the day, I know that's what matters.
But there was only 3 PI, I think, there. That I had two friends who attended, and they were like, I think there's just 3 of us.
Of course, we have The Rock, who we love, but there's other people too, like in these other spaces that I think need to be represented.
How are we expecting people to be able to break into the industry if they're not given just the money to be able to like tell their story?
Hello, I'm Lindsay Watson. I go by she, her, and I play Pō'ele Wai in The Wind and the Reckoning.
My name is Tiare Ribeaux. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns, and I was the writer and director and editor for Pō'ele Wai, which means As the Water Darkens.
My name is Filimaua. I go by he, him, and I'm a writer and director of Fili.
My name is Angelique Kalani Axelrode. I use she, they pronouns. I was the director, producer, editor, and acted in A Tale of Two Sisters with my sister, who was the other performer and also helped produce the film. The short film A Tale of Two Sisters, which I shot last year with my sister, is inspired by the mo'olelo of Hi'iaka and Pō'ele, which is the story of Hi'iaka and her sister Pele. And it's kind of like a coming of age of Hi'iaka specifically, but what the short film focuses on is more of Pele and Hi'iaka's relationship as sisters.
Pō'ele Wai came about shortly after the major fuel leaks from the Red Hill Volk fuel storage facility at Kapukaki that caused the poisoning of our watersheds and our aquifers. I felt a way that I could approach being a kia'i, or a water protector, was through making this film that was a fictional account of a weaver who slowly realizes they're being poisoned by their own drinking water.
Fili is about a Samoan American who is a recent graduate of high school, and he's a big football star, and he kind of has to live up to the pressures of his father, who wants him to continue playing football, but he has other dreams of pursuing acting.
So it's a true Hawaiian story taking place in Hawaii in the 1800s, late 1800s, and it's around the time of leprosy and the overthrow in Hawaii. It follows a husband and wife, Ko'olau and Pō'ele, and their son, Kalemanu, but it's their journey on the run from the provisional government as they're hunted down. In that time, Hawaiians and anyone with signs of leprosy were rounded up, taken away from their family, and taken to an island for them to die. And Ko'olau and Pō'ele were a Hawaiian couple who were not going to go easy in the night. So we followed their adventure, standing up for what they believe in and on the run with their son. I don't mind AAPI if we're gonna get our proper representation, but I think that's the only problem and why it's come up and why we have to have that discussion. And I don't put blame on the AA because it's not their fault. To me, it's like the basic answer to that is there's just way more AA than there is PI. And I also can't speak because I am the ultimate AAPI. I am Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, and Hawaiian, but when it comes to film and television, I'm PI is what they see. I'm not Asian enough for Hollywood for them to ever consider me as Asian, so I do focus more on the PI, and I come from Hawaii, and that's what I categorize myself as. And I, at least coming from the actor standpoint, have always got the short end of the stick because the focus is always on the AA, and we don't really get enough opportunities for the PI side for us. I do think a little bit of separation is helpful so that we can get a spotlight on the Pacific Islander side because, as always, there's not many of us. We're still super new in this industry, and we understand that we're babies and we're trying to catch up, but we're never gonna catch up if we keep getting left in the shadow. So for me, I love the idea that more PI programs are coming out. There's things like Peak that are putting focus on Pacific Islanders so that we get that opportunity, because within Pacific Islander there's so many different things. You have Hawaiians, you have Samoan, you have Tongan, you have Maori, you have all of these that we get grouped in so easily, and then group in again with the Asian Americans, we totally all get lost in there. So I think separation is good. AAPI was a good term to finally give us some representation and a platform. And I don't think it's a bad thing now that everyone's kind of starting to have their individual moment to shine.
I also feel like growing up in Hawaii, it is a very mixed community. I'm also Hawaiian, Japanese, Chinese, so it's like a lot of us have this identity, but we also really center our Pacific Islander experience, and it's vastly different than a lot of Asian American experience, I would say. And even the Hawaiian experience is vastly different than other kind of like the continental experience of being Asian American, of being Pacific Islander. So we love being in solidarity with Asian Americans, and I think the beauty of AAPI, kind of the grouping of that, is that solidarity can be built. At the same time, I do think there is a space for just the Pacifica community to be highlighted, to be uplifted, to be celebrated, because there's a lot of excellence within our community and so much talent and so much cultural richness and depth. What was beautiful, I think, and where I met these folks here is at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival. There were specific kind of Pacifica screenings and programs, and our community really came out for that. And it was amazing to see us all in community and celebrating our films with our voices centered. The Arms with a Camera, which I think Peter can speak to, that program was all Pacific Islander filmmakers, and I had just never seen that kind of spectrum of voices and films and stories being told before, and I was like crying just by seeing our stories on screen.
If they do want to include us in that group, then we at least share in the resources. I feel like a lot of it goes towards the AA. There needs to be more representation on screen too as well.
How movements do gain traction is when people come together versus being separated, but again, there's been a clear imbalance in representation within the AAPI community. So, and I think everyone's like talking about the remediations taking place right now with organizations like PEAK or PIC, Pacific Islanders in Communication. So more programs like that, more resources being funneled. But I think, of course, yeah, we're all standing together in support of each other at the end of the day.
Last year's Gold Gala, which is an AAPI organization that is amazing, really love what they're doing, but there was only 3 PI, I think, there. That I had two friends who attended, and they were like, I think there's just 3 of us. And there were, I don't know how many hundreds are there. So I think, but this year was better. I think there was more. I know Crit was there, who represents PEAK and is an amazing organizer, filmmaker. Again, it's like building, and I think it's like as these organizations do take note and reassess the inclusion of PI, you know, in the name that they're, and in what they're representing, it would involve more inclusion of us and more, yeah, uplifting of our voices. I'm personally excited about kind of Jason's homecoming, to make this story about Kaiana and Kamehameha and that whole time of our history. I remember hearing about that and being so excited, because I think a lot of Pacific Islanders who've worked in Hollywood for a really long time, like Jason Momoa, are being called home to make this work and to tell our stories from our point of view. You know, and it's giving more Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders opportunities to work in these roles that really represent, you know, their history, their ancestry. It's a way to bridge, I think, even Hollywood back to the core, the source, the island, and the deep mo'olelo that we're all exploring through our stories.
A big point I always talk about, coming from the point of an actress, is our auditions, our opportunities are so low because we're still at that point of them only looking at us as Hawaiians, as Polynesians, and it always has to be about us being Hawaiians and Polynesians. I can never just audition for a role as an actress as just like the next doctor on Grey's Anatomy without it having to be like, oh, she's this Hawaiian hula dancer who moved from Hawaii. Like, why can't I just be that? You know, that's one of the things I love to look at as the Asian Americans. You guys have finally got out of that a bit. You know, it used to have to be, oh, they have to be the smart kid or this, the immigrant. But it's like now Asian Americans have paved that way because they've become so normalized in Hollywood's eyes to just be like everyone else. And so there's many audition opportunities and job opportunities. Whereas for us as Hawaiians and Polynesians, they're still working on getting us to that idea of like, oh, you're just like us. You could just be any other person on the show. So for me, I love that people like Jason and Iam are coming out and finally bringing some normalcy to be like, hey, look, we're just talented people just like you guys. we can just be put in the same room on the same show.
Of course, we have The Rock, who we love, but there's other people too, like in these other spaces that I think need to be represented, and we need to celebrate the Polynesians in sports, but I would love to see more celebration in all aspects, like all media, with the musicians, artists, all types of creatives. I think, that lane is finally starting to be open, so I'm excited to see where it's headed.
I would also love to see more Polynesians like behind the scenes making decisions about like Chief of War, for example, and like how many of those producers or executive producers are Polynesian, are Native Hawaiian, because of course representation in front of the camera, as we all know, is extremely important in validating, and Polynesians should be able to take space in a wide, like in any type of character that they want to portray, but it also needs to be reflected behind the scenes as well to ensure that the process and the story is authentic as well. I would love to see more Polynesian women, Polynesian queer people, Polynesian like Mahu, like Native Hawaiian Mahu people being uplifted as well. I mean, programs like Peek and Pick and like Hawaii Women in Filmmaking, for example, like they are like doing the things and they know, like they've been in the space paving the way for us for like years now. So honestly, just giving more resources, more grant funding. I'm like, where is all the grant funding going? Specifically as like an emerging filmmaker, how are we expecting people to be able to break into the industry if they're not given just the money to be able to like tell their story in a way that they want to, in a way that's authentic, and that they have people around them that are also supporting and being included in the conversation as well. So I think there's just a lack of, the distribution of resources is very imbalanced. So I think in order for stories to be told accurately and authentically, there just simply needs to be more money being given to creators, because there's a ton of Polynesian filmmakers out there. I do some work with Future Now Media Foundation, which is like a leadership incubator for people who also want to be like behind the scenes and like marketing, or work with like producers, or do more of the business level stuff that is still so important to how these stories are being delivered and who is being given resources and access and like a seat at the table, and more targeted outreach towards people who are Polynesian who want to enter into the media landscape or technology landscape but don't maybe have the resources, don't know where to enter, don't have like a family member, because it's also a very like connection-based industry.
One of the biggest goals that we realize is that we need a lot more Polynesians in power. Until we have them in power, no one's gonna really take us serious. We're very lucky every now and then if there's an executive out there who just happens to have the heart for smaller cultures and places like this. But the expectation is most people don't. It's a money business, and I understand that. I know if I was an executive up at the top, I would be looking for these stories, and I can see the value in these stories. I see where I can market them, how I can market them, and how they can make us money, because at the end of the day, I know that's what matters. But until those people are at the top, there's nothing we can do, and it kind of sources back to that. Without these programs, I come from Hawaii, born and raised there. I had zero resources. I'm just lucky that I had the tenacity to just go and move to LA on my own with no thought, no resources, no idea of what I was jumping into. And so I look back, and it's nice for me knowing that I went and I did that all on my own, and now I have a bunch of kids from Hawaii reaching out to me going, hey, I want to be a director, I want to act, what can I do? And it's sad for me that they have to just reach out, because that's the only way they can get any information of how to follow these careers. We have places like New Zealand, Aotearoa, where they have things like Maoriland, which are these massive film programs that nurture their young to, it's like step by step. There's so much funding. It's so easy for them. It's not even like a difficult process. I talk to so many of them, and they're like, yeah, if you want to make a film, there's money, and you just come in and they follow you and they help you. And in Hawaii, we just have nothing like that. With none of those programs, none of that funding, there's not going to be any of that nurturing and that guidance to get us to the place. And then when we do make it to LA, we're nearly non-existent out here, So speaking to the point of LA-based people, it would be just cool if they could it's really like they just have to help us, because we are such a small number that's why I think we're falling behind so much. We have a lot of tenacity and we are determined to get our stories out there. I mean, as you can see, we'll pay out of our own pockets to make our things get made, you know? That's why we stand by our Asian American brothers and sisters, because they see what we're doing and they stand beside us, and thanks to them we've gotten a lot of opportunities because they have such a big background. They have a big crowd that follows them and supports them, so having things like that, those partnerships and people to really just help us, because I always just picture us as like the babies in this, like we're still getting our footing and we're still trying to learn. But I mean, we're coming out fiery and we see what can happen, and we're just chasing that really bad right now.
Our stories are very universal. Like, they're very specific culturally, but they're also universal. I think in the same way, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, like touched so many people, and it was, you know, an immigrant Asian American experience. It was also so universal as to these family connections that people have across the board in all cultures. I think the tenacity, I think what we've survived, what our ancestors have survived, and also the ways that we've traveled the world as Polynesian folks, like literally crossing oceans. Like, how can we tell the stories that bridge and bring that history without it being Moana necessarily, you know? Like, and it's funny because I remember seeing Moana in theaters and like crying, because I was like, oh my God, finally. But at the same time, it like isn't contemporary, and there's a ton of contemporary stories that need to be told about our experience that connects to that history, that shows kind of like how strong our people have been to adapt, to travel, to really, you know, push our voices throughout the world, that again have this deep history of navigation, of brilliance, of knowledge, that I think people are slowly starting to understand, and we hope that production companies are like, and people who want to invest in these stories, and people that want our, you know, our voices to be heard are really starting to latch on to.
A lot of people, I grew up in LA, and I was like one of very few Polynesians in all my education, elementary, high school, so a lot of it was just like educating people on who we are. When I would say I'm Samoan, people would be like, oh, like, where is that? Like, or is that like similar to Filipino or like Somalia? Like, people would like joke about that. I just graduated from USC, and I was the only Polynesian filmmaker in the master's program. So I would love to see more filmmakers telling their stories, because there's so many stories to be told out there, not just the stereotypical like football stories or like the Moanas, I guess, of what we're known for. I would love to branch out and see stories where we're just seen as people rather than these stereotypes.
I'm all about acting, obviously, and so for me, it's just motivating that next generation to follow these dreams, and we're out here working our tails off and really fighting the good fight so that they don't have to. I already see a change that's happened in my short time here in LA. From the time I moved here, you know, I talk a lot about how I never once auditioned for a Polynesian, Hawaiian, anything like that. It was everything under the sun that I wasn't, because what they used to call me was ethnically ambiguous. So I was their one-stop shop, and it's funny because I was never any of those things, but for them it was close enough. And that was always really hard and heartbreaking for me. But now, only 9 years into LA, I see so many projects coming to Hawaii, so many opportunities, them actually looking for Hawaiians. I was super lucky. Like, the first day that I finally saw a casting breakdown looking for Hawaiians was a Netflix film, which I was super lucky to be in, and that was, I feel like, one of the first stepping stones of just even opening that door of that conversation. My film, Win in the Reckoning, it's been so exciting, and I love the success we've been getting around the world, but at the same time, we're having to work so much harder than any other film, you know, any other normal big box office film, because it's not what they deem as a normal film, you know, and that's just so frustrating for me. And I hope this next generation of filmmakers and actors and anyone behind the camera doesn't have to work nearly as hard as we have to fix the problem, you know. Taika just had this like speech he said, and it was so true. It was like, we're having to work so hard to fix what you guys broke.
Making us come and talk about the problem and tell you how to fix it. You fucking broke it. You fix it.
We have always been here, and yeah, maybe not as large in masses, but we are growing and growing, and we are not going anywhere. I just hope that as these kids keep watching these movies, seeing us as filmmakers, as actors, as directors, that they're seeing this as a total easy possibility, that it would be on their radar, because most kids, if I look back to my childhood, everyone thought I was crazy. They thought I was the little weirdo in school because it's like in Hawaii, that's not a thing you do. When I said I want to be an actress, they're like, we don't know how to help you. I mean, we've never had that before. So I want it to become where it's just normal for these kids. I want these kids to be able to chase their dreams and not think it's a crazy out there thing like how I had to look at it.